Hey guys, Stephen Cox here, and today we're going to be learning how to add to your root fifth country lines to make them more interesting with some walk-ins. So if you like videos like these, please hit subscribe below and consider becoming a patron for the sheet music for this lesson and many others. So now we're on to our 4-beat walk-ins. So these are ones that you've probably heard a lot. They're very, very common. And I'm going to go ahead and play through the first 8 measures of this. And this is just the first half of these because I gave some extra variations. So here's what it sounds like. So first, we're just starting with our root fifth on G. Then the whole next measure is going to be our walk-up phrase. So what I'm doing there is I'm playing the root twice. Then I'm just walking up the scale. Second note of the scale, third note of the scale, and we end up on our 4th note of the scale, which is the C note, which is the downbeat of the next chord. So let me explain that in frets now. I'm kind of flipping this on you. Because I figure you understand the frets, so we're just going to talk the theory now. So first we've got our root, then our fifth, then we've got root, root, second, third, fourth, which is the root of the next chord. Fret-wise, that's 3rd fret on the E string, 5th fret on the A string, 3rd fret on the E string 2 times, 5th fret on the E string, 2nd fret on the A string, and then the downbeat of our next measure, our C chord, is the 3rd fret on the A string. Okay, so that one's really common, and honestly, if you have a major chord going to another major chord that's a 4th away, or if you're on a particular fret on one string and the root of the next chord is on that same fret but a string thinner, then you can do that walk up and it'll pretty much work as long as you're going from a major chord to a major chord and you use that walk up. It's a very strong pattern, so you probably only want to use it to mark the end of a phrase, or you just want to use it in places in the music where it sounds like it needs it. You don't want to overuse this, and that goes with any of the walk ups really. Okay, so now we're on our C chord. Here's what we're playing here, and we're going to D, which is what we end up on. So here we're playing our root and our 5th, 3rd fret on the A string, which is a C note, 3rd fret on the E string, which is a G note, and then we do this cool little walk. And so what we're doing here is we're playing the root of our C chord, which is 3rd fret on the A string. Then we're just going to go backwards 1 fret, back to our root, up 1 fret, and then up 1 more fret will end us up on our root of the next chord. So this little thing is kind of just a way to kill time, but you can also tell that there's only one chromatic note in there that's not in the scale also. So if we start on a C and we go backwards 1 fret to the 2nd fret on the A string, that's a B note, and that's in our G major scale, which all of these notes are going to be in our G major scale because the song is in the key of G even though we're switching chords. Okay, so we're going down to a B, which is in our scale, then we're going back to C, which is the root of our chord, also in our scale. Then we're going to add a chromatic passing tone, which means this next note is not in our scale, but it's next in line. We're just going 1 fret up to the 4th fret, and then that leads us 1 fret up to our 5th fret on the A string. So we've just got this kind of like motion where we're just going backwards and then forwards 2 notes. So backwards 1 note, then forward, forward. I guess technically it's 3 notes when you get to the downbeat of the next measure. So this works pretty well almost every time you have 2 chords that are 2 frets away from each other on the same string. So if you see that, you can kind of do this unless one of them is minor. If they're both major chords, you can do it. And in most cases, you can do it even if the second chord is minor. If the first chord was minor, you probably wouldn't want to do it. But that's pretty much one of the only cases that won't work. So you can probably assume safely that if you have 2 major chords where the roots are 2 frets apart from each other, that you can get away with that little backwards 1 fret, then forwards until you get to the next one. So that's a cool little device that you can use. But once again, if you use these things too much, it stops sounding like traditional country, which should have just more of the root 5th notes, and it starts sounding a little bit almost cheesy if you have way too many of these walk-ins. So you want to use them sparingly. So here's the next one. This is going from a D chord all the way through back to G. It sounds like this. So let me say the frets really quickly. 5th fret on the A string, 5th fret on the E string, 5th fret on the A string, 3rd fret, 2nd fret, still on the A string. Now we're going to go to the 5th fret on the E string, and then we're going to end up on 3rd fret on the E string, which is a G note. So that's where we're going next. What we're doing here is we're playing our root, then our 5th, then the walk down starts. So what we're doing there is after we play that 5th, we go back to our root of our D chord, and then we're walking down the G major scale to G. So it's pretty straightforward. We just end up playing D, C, B, A, G, which from that starting point is the 5th note of the G major scale, then the 4th note, 3rd note, 2nd, and then boom, we're back to G. And now that we're back on G, here's how we round this out. So if you're on a G chord and you're going to a G chord, but in the middle of it, it felt like the end of the phrase, and then you start it over for the next verse or whatever part of the song it is, you've got to kind of punctuate it with a walk-in. This is the walk-in that you can use there. Right? So let's talk about what we're doing there. So we've got our G note that we ended up on last time. Then we're going to hit the 5th of the chord, which happens to be the 5th fret on the A string. That's a D note. Then we're going to go to the 5th fret on the D string, which is another G. We're going back to our root now. And here, we're going to go to a 5th again, really quickly this time, like right after it, not waiting for the next half note. Then we're going to go up to the 2nd fret on the D string, which is just walking up the G major scale. Then the 4th fret on the D string, which is still just walking up the G major scale back to a G, which is the 5th fret on the D string. So the walk up itself is, well, that's the walk up measure, I should say. G, D, E, F sharp, if you want the note names as well. So that's a really common one. So if you get that finger pattern down, just know that you can start with your pinky on whatever chord you're on, and then do that finger pattern. And as long as you have that string to go to, a thicker string to go to for the 2nd note of that pattern, then you can use that in different songs. So now we've just got more examples of walk-ins that we can do. Here's the next part. Some of these aren't quite as common, but they're still pretty cool if you can find a place to use them. So this first part is kind of weird because I told you we're going to be using the G major scale exclusively, and this is one exception. So a lot of times this will happen if a song has like a G note, and then toward the tail end of it, it has a G7 chord for the last little part of it. So a G chord turns into a G7 chord. That'll dictate basically that we can end up using an F instead of an F sharp there. But sometimes if they're just playing a 3-note chord, we can just pretend it's a G7 chord, break the rules, and use an F note instead of an F sharp. But we're essentially just walking down the scale other than replacing our F sharp with F. So let me show you what I mean. We're playing our root and our fifth. And here's where we go. G, F, E, D, C. Just walking straight down. It would be the G major scale, but we're replacing the F sharp with an F note. So we end up with the 5th fret on the D string, the 3rd fret, the 2nd fret, and then when we get to the A string, we're going to use the 5th fret, and then we end up on our 3rd fret on the A string, which is our C note. So root, 5th, root, flat 7, 6, 5, 4. So now we're on our C chord. And if that theory didn't make sense, what I was saying out loud, those were scale degrees with the flatted 7th, which just means subtracting 1 fret from what the 7th note of the major scale would have been, which was an F sharp being turned into an F. So that's a little confusing. If you have questions about it, please leave them in the comments below. I promise you, if you have a question about it, somebody else does too, and hopefully I can elaborate there. So now that we're on the C chord, we've got so here all I'm doing is really a C arpeggio. It's not really a walk-in or a walk-up. It's just going up the arpeggio and back down because it leads kind of nicely into the next chord, which is D. So all I'm doing there, first I'm playing the root of the chord, which is a C, 3rd fret on the A string. Then I'm playing the 5th of the chord, which happens to be the 5th fret on the D string. 3rd fret on the A string, 2nd fret on the D string, 5th fret on the D string, back to the 2nd fret on the D string. Of the C chord, that's the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and back to the 3rd. And that leads nicely into a D note, which is only a step away from the E note. If I played it here, you could see it. But I chose to play it here for convenience. But basically, we're just doing root, 3rd, 5th, 3rd, and then we end up on a D chord. So when we get to the D chord, it sounds like this. So that's essentially the same walk-up that we used on the G chord going back to the G chord. It's just instead of having a G note on the downbeat, we replaced it with a D note on the downbeat. So instead of ending up with, we end up with, so I'll go over the frets so we can kind of explain what that means. First, we've got 5th fret on the A string, 5th fret on the E string, back to 5th fret on the A string, 2 times. Then we're going to go 2nd fret on the D string, 4th fret, and then 5th fret on the D string, which happens to be a G note. So now I'm going to give you what's going on. We've got the root of our D chord going to the 5th, back to the root, then the root again. Then we're going to walk up the G major scale. That's the 6th note of the G major scale. Then the 7th note of the G major scale. And then we're back to our G. So that lands us for that G note on the G chord, and that's the 5th fret on the D string. And now we're here, we're at the final part of the song. This sounds like, and so this is another use of an arpeggio to kind of get from G back to G, just so that we have an additional way that we can start on a chord and let you know that it's the end of the song going back to the beginning of the song, even though the chord is the same at the end as it is at the beginning. Just so it's not confusing, we can mark it with this little thing or the other walk up that we did earlier. First, we've got the 5th fret on the D string, the 5th fret on the A string, the 3rd fret on the E string, then the 5th fret on the A string, 2nd fret on the A string, and the 5th fret on the E string. And so what that is going through all that again. We're playing the G note, it's the root of our chord, going to our 5th. Then we're going to the lower version of our root. That 3rd fret on the E string is just a lower G note. And then now we're going to the 5th of the chord again. Then this the 2nd fret on the A string is actually the 3rd of the G chord. And then we're going to walk down the scale from that 3rd which is the second fret on the A string. Geez, I know it's confusing saying third and second back to back. The third of our chord happens to be the second fret on the A string. And then we're walking down the G major scale from there, so we end up with an A note, and then we end up with a G at the end. So if you wanted the note names, that's from the beginning of that G chord. G, D, G, D, B, A, and then we're back to G. Alright guys, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed learning how to do some walk-ups on some country songs. So if you like this video, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe for more like this, and consider becoming a patron where you can print out the sheet music for this lesson and many others.